Welcome. I'm Robert Alexander, and I want to share something with you that truly changed my life. It's not an easy story to tell, but I believe it's one worth hearing. June 18th, 2017 will always be a day etched in my memory. For over 2 decades, I was an Army soldier. The military shaped everything about who I was: discipline, loyalty, and honor. Those values were my foundation. I was the guy who trusted logic, strategy, and what I could see, touch, and verify. Faith? That was something I just couldn't grasp. If it wasn't explained in a way that made sense to me, I simply didn't believe it. But after years of war, something inside me began to change. War takes its toll, and I felt it in every part of my being. The pride I once felt in my uniform faded away as the years passed. I thought about the friends I'd lost, men and women who had been beside me through the hardest moments, only to be taken away in an instant. I couldn't shake their faces from my mind, and the guilt I carried for surviving when they didn't. It was like a weight I couldn't escape. In those moments, I started to ask myself some tough questions. Where was God in all of this? How could He allow so much pain and suffering if He truly existed? I buried those questions deep inside, trying to stay busy to avoid facing them. But the more I ignored them, the louder they got. My body was scarred by combat, and my mind was too. Old injuries kept me awake at night, and pain was a constant companion. I joked about being held together by luck and medical tape, but the truth was, I was falling apart. One evening, after a particularly rough day, I felt a sharp pain in my chest. At first, I thought it was just indigestion or stress. But as the pain spread to my arm and neck, I realized something was seriously wrong. My breathing became shallow, and I could barely call 911 before my vision started to fade. The last thing I remember was hearing the sirens approaching. What happened next is something I'll never forget. When I opened my eyes, I realized something was different. I wasn't in my body anymore. There was no pain, no struggle, just an overwhelming sense of stillness. Not a peaceful kind of silence, but a heavy, infinite stillness. I could see my body on the floor, lifeless, while paramedics frantically worked to revive me. But their voices were distorted, like they were speaking through water. I wanted to call out to them to tell them I was still here, but nothing came out. Then it hit me. I wasn't in my body anymore. I was floating above it, weightless and calm. For the first time in what felt like forever, the pain was gone. I was filled with a sense of peace and tranquility that I can't even put into words. Everything below me seemed so distant, like it was happening to someone else. The paramedics worked, their faces tense and focused, but I wasn't scared. I wasn't worried. I just knew, deep down, that this wasn't the end. It felt like the beginning of something entirely different. Then I saw it. At first it was just a small glimmer in the distance, but as I focused on it, it grew brighter. This wasn't any ordinary light. It wasn't harsh or blinding. It was warm, gentle, and almost alive. It pulsed, as if it were breathing. The light slowly pulled me toward it. At first, I resisted, but then something inside me said I shouldn't. It felt like a hug, but not in the way you'd expect. It was more than that. It was a sense of love, compassion, and understanding that I had never experienced before. The closer I got, the stronger the feeling became. And then something incredible happened. I realized I wasn't alone in the light. In the center of it stood a figure, a man, but he wasn't like anyone I had ever known. His presence radiated love and authority, and yet there was no fear. I felt small, almost insignificant in his presence, as if he knew everything about me, every thought, every mistake. He called me by my name, Alexander, in a voice that was both calm and powerful. Before I could even respond, he said, "I know your pain." And in that moment, I felt something I never expected, I felt seen. I had carried so much guilt for surviving when my friends hadn't, so much anger for the suffering I had seen, and so much uncertainty about my own life. And here he was, knowing everything and yet offering no judgment, only love. He continued, "You've questioned if I was there, but I was with you in the darkest moments, in the silence, in the pain. I never left you." His words reached deep into me, cutting through all the layers of anger, fear, and doubt that I had built up over the years. I remembered those nights after combat, the nights I tried to drink away the pain, the prayers I whispered in desperation, hoping someone, anyone, was listening. And now, I knew. He had been there the entire time. Even when I couldn't feel him, he was there, never leaving my side. As I stood in his presence, I felt years of sorrow and shame melting away. I wanted to ask him so many things. Why did he allow the pain? Why did he let me see my friends die? But before I could ask, he spoke again. "I never promised there wouldn't be suffering," he said softly. "But I promised I'd be with you through it." His voice sank deep into my soul. "The pain you've witnessed, the lives lost, it wasn't my design. The world has turned away from me, and with that comes choices. Choices that bring both love and hatred, peace and war, life and death." I couldn't hold back anymore. For years, I had kept my tears hidden because soldiers were supposed to be tough. But at that moment, I cried. I cried for my friends, for the families torn apart by war, for the times I felt completely alone. But even as the tears flowed, I didn't feel guilty. I felt his hand on my shoulder, warm and steady, comforting me in a way I had never known. "You're not here by accident," he said. "There's more I need to show you." And just like that, everything changed. The warmth I had felt began to fade, replaced by a cold, oppressive heaviness. When I looked around, I saw something that I will never forget. In the distance, there was a vast land of darkness, emptiness, and despair. It wasn't just the absence of light, it was something much worse. The air felt heavy, crushing, and as I looked deeper into the darkness, I saw something horrifying. People, shadows, twisted and tormented, moving aimlessly through the darkness. Their faces were contorted by grief, and their cries echoed in the void. They weren't random people. Just like me, they had once been alive. Some of them cried out for help, but the vast darkness swallowed them whole. Others were trapped in eternal agony, weighed down by regrets and mistakes they could never undo. Their pain was unbearable, and it wasn't just physical, it reached into my soul. I could feel it, deep and raw, as if it were my own. And the worst part? This place, this endless void, had no end. It was a place of eternal suffering where hope seemed completely lost. "This," Jesus remarked with anguish, "is what separation from me looks like." His words hurt, but I couldn't look away and deny seeing it. Those spirits suffered from something deeper than fire or shackles. Their decisions had kept them from Jesus' love and grace, and they were stuck in the consequences. He said, "Hell isn't a place I send people. It's a place people choose when they reject me." He had sorrowful eyes, and I recognized something heartbreaking. They shouldn't have been there. They avoided the light as I did, despite being welcomed. This was picked. "Every soul is given a choice," Jesus remarked. "I reach out to them over and over, but some refuse to listen. I never stop calling, but I won't force anyone to love me." Heartbroken by his remarks, I thought about the folks I had seen, their contorted features and ceaseless screams. Suppose they change, asked. If they recognize they were wrong? Jesus' look conveyed hope and anguish. "As long as they have breath in their bodies," he said, "there's still a chance. But when this life ends, that choice becomes final." I was shaken by their statements. I suppressed my misgivings for years, believing God had forgotten me. Now I knew He hadn't forgotten anybody. He had been waiting, calling, and reaching out to souls too preoccupied, obstinate, or shattered to hear him. Jesus said, "Alexander," gently yet firmly, "that's why you're here. I didn't show you this just for you. I need you to tell them. Tell them what you've seen. Tell them that no one is too far gone, that my love is greater than their mistakes, their failures, or their regrets. They need to know that as long as they're still breathing, it's not too late." My chest felt heavy with duty and urgency as I heard those words, feeling overwhelmed. I asked, "But how? How am I supposed to make people believe this?" It seemed like Jesus understood my feelings as his countenance relaxed. "You don't have to make them believe," he said. "You just have to tell them. Some will listen and some won't, but that isn't for you to decide. Just speak the truth and let me do the rest." Lowering my head, I wondered whether I could do what he asked. Over the years, I have focused on regulating my emotions, choices, and behaviors. His request was to trust him entirely and enter the unknown. I said, "I don't know if I'm the right person. I'm not a preacher. I don't even know how to explain what I've seen." Jesus responded, "You are enough," firmly touching my shoulder. "You always have been." He spoke without hesitation. Even if I didn't believe in myself, he did. "You must return," he urged. I felt both relieved and sad hearing those words. I didn't want to leave this beautiful tranquility and overpowering affection. Inside, I knew he was correct. My time here continued. This was a gift, so I couldn't squander it. Around me, the light softened and dimmed. The warmth around me faded, and I felt something dragging me back to the world I left behind. And I said, "Wait," shaking my voice. "What if I forget? What if I wake up and this all feels like a dream?" Jesus' eyes met mine, and I'll never forget his words. "You won't forget," he guaranteed. "What you've seen is now a part of you, and I will be with you every step of the way." His words protected me like armor, and for the first time in a long time, I felt strong, not because of anything I had done, but because I wouldn't be alone. Light faded and warmth vanished. Peace, quiet, and wonderful love were eroding. Without saying a word, I returned. My body felt frigid and lead-filled. I heard a person yelling, "He's back! We've got a pulse!" I awoke to paramedics, physicians, and nurses scrambling to stabilize me. The acute, crushing, and persistent agony came instantaneously, but it didn't matter. I knew why I lived. The following days were a blur. Family members came and went. Doctors checked my vitals, and everyone kept repeating the same phrase, "It's a miracle you made it." But my mind wasn't on what they were saying. It was elsewhere, focusing on the brightness, the love, and the faces I saw in the darkness. It was a feeling I couldn't keep to myself. I had to share my story no matter how difficult or uncomfortable it might be, or who might question me. The task that Jesus had given me was too powerful to ignore. Leaving the hospital, I was forever changed, physically, mentally, and spiritually. I knew I couldn't waste this second chance at life. Although I trusted what I had experienced, talking about it was a different matter. How could I possibly explain something so overwhelming and impossible to put into words? What if no one believed me? What if they laughed or thought I was crazy? For a while, my doubts kept me silent. I tried to push the experience out of my mind, convincing myself that I needed time to process it. But no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, the words Jesus spoke to me continued to echo in my mind. Tell them. They must know. So, I started by talking to my family. One night at dinner, I found the courage to speak. I told them about the pain I felt in my chest, the experience of death, the light, and the encounter with Jesus. I shared the deep sense of love and peace, but also the overwhelming darkness and the spirits I saw, souls full of regret and torment. When I finished, the room fell silent. My wife, Emily, wiped away tears as she looked at me. "I believe you," she whispered. "I always knew there was more, and now I know for sure." My oldest son gave a nod, though he seemed deep in thought. "It's a lot," he said, pausing, "but I believe you too, Dad." Those words gave me strength, but I knew this was just the beginning. I realized that some people were feeling hopeless, like they had gone too far, too deep, and needed to hear my story. I believed Jesus had sent me back for them. I started sharing my experience with close friends, people who knew me well enough to trust I wasn't lying. Some asked questions about what I had seen, while others seemed to want to believe but didn't know how to. One of my friends, Greg, a veteran like me, sat quietly while I spoke. After a long pause, he shook his head and said, "I don't know, man. It sounds pretty out there." I didn't blame him. If I had heard this story just a few weeks ago, I might have thought the same. But before leaving, Greg stopped at the door and turned back to me. "I've been carrying some things," he said. "Things I've never talked about. If what you're saying is true, maybe there's hope for me too." That moment stuck with me. I realized that my story wasn't about convincing people to believe me. It was about giving them hope. Even if they didn't believe me right away, hearing what I had seen might make them think, question, and feel that God was still reaching out to them. Encouraged, I began speaking at church and at veteran support groups. Each time I shared my story, I was nervous, but I kept going. Some people cried, some silently thanked me, and occasionally someone would ask, "Do you really believe there's still hope for someone like me?" My answer was always the same: yes, absolutely. As I continued sharing, I began to see how many others carried the same burdens I had: guilt, anger, regret, that they felt had separated them from God's love. Their faces reflected the sadness I had felt. I told them Jesus' words: "It's not too late. Hope remains as long as you're breathing." One night, after a church service, a woman approached me. Her hands trembled as she spoke. "My son," she said, her voice breaking. He took his own life last year." She paused, wiping her eyes before looking directly at me. "Hearing your story, I can't explain it, but it's like something lifted off my chest." I didn't know what to say, so I simply took her hand and whispered, "He sees you. He knows your pain, and he's never stopped loving you." She nodded, tears still in her eyes, and in that moment, I understood why Jesus had sent me back, to remind people of God's love and to show them that no one is too far gone. It wasn't about preaching or pushing faith. It was about reminding them that they were loved, that they hadn't been forgotten. I also began reaching out to soldiers like me, men and women haunted by what they had seen and done. Many of them couldn't accept forgiveness, feeling they were beyond saving. But I told them what Jesus had told me: "I was with you in your darkest hours. I never left you." These words broke down walls I never thought possible. For some of them, it was the first time they believed grace was still possible. I learned something important through this. My experience wasn't just for believers. There were so many people who felt lost, as though there was no hope left. Jesus didn't send me back to preach to perfect people or ask them to stay perfect. He sent me for the broken, the unsure, the wounded, because God's love calls everyone home no matter how far they've fallen. Over time, sharing my story became more than just a responsibility. It became a calling. When I spoke, I saw the faces in the crowd, people with tired eyes and heavy hearts, people who were barely holding on. I knew how that felt. I had lived it. One man, Jason, a fellow veteran, came up to me after one of my talks. He had been fighting his own demons, and after everyone else had left, he approached me quietly. "I don't know why I'm telling you this," he said, his voice shaking. "But tonight, I was planning on ending it all." He looked down, his hands trembling. But when you talked about Jesus being with you in the dark, it hit me. I've been in that darkness for years, and maybe I wasn't alone after all. I told him the truth because I didn't have any other words. You weren't, I said. He's been with you the whole time, even when you thought no one was. Jason broke down at that moment, and I stayed with him for as long as he needed. It felt like an eternity, but it was a moment I will never forget. If he hadn't stayed behind, I don't know what would have happened, but I know Jesus sent me back for people like him. And in that moment, I understood what Jesus meant when he said, just tell them. I didn't need all the answers. I didn't need perfect words or a flawless existence. I just had to share what I had seen, how real Jesus is, how his love is bigger than any mistake, and how no one is beyond his reach. You are never beyond God's love. No matter what you've done or how far you feel from him, there is always hope. As long as you're breathing, God's love is still there, waiting for you. If my story has touched you, please share it. You might know someone who needs to hear that God's love is real, strong, and waiting for them. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. God bless.